When the bride leaned close and hissed, "Stay silent if you know what's good for you," I swallowed my anger until one cruel photo changed everything. I spoke just once, and every smiling face around us froze in shock. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments from where you are watching this video. I stood at the edge of the stone patio, holding my breath steady. The vineyards dropped in neat green rows, like ruled paper stretching downhill. Photographers barked numbers and moved people around with quick, gentle hands. I kept my jacket buttoned and my thoughts colder than the breeze. Ryan stood centered, glowing with the hope he had wanted for years. Kendra drifted beside him, lace radiant, perfume heavy, smile perfectly measured. Guests hovered behind sunglasses, ready for cocktails and easy gossip. "Evan, 2 steps left," the photographer called, cheerful and precise. I slid over and fixed my tie with a small tug. I planned to be quiet, helpful, and impossible to distract. I had been best man before, and never once doubted the couple's core. Today felt different, like walking into a room with a gas smell. The ceremony ran on time, vows crisp and polite under the old oak. Still, Kendra's eyes kept skimming the edges like she was counting exits. Ryan missed it because love can be bright enough to blind. Hannah squeezed my wrist during the recessional and mouthed, "Breathe, okay?" I nodded and tried, though my jaw ached from clenching. "She's pushing too hard," Hannah whispered later, tone low and steady. "She's always pushing hard," I said, keeping my voice even. I reminded myself that weddings turn decent people into terrible project managers. We lined by height, then family, then college friends, then the wedding party. The photographer clapped, counted, and adjusted chins with a conductor's confidence. "Best man, chin down," she said, and I obeyed automatically. Ryan whispered, "You good?" And I nodded because he needed calm. Kendra stepped in front of me, smile perfect, eyes cool as tinted glass. She leaned back until her veil brushed my lapel like a warning flag. "Stay silent during photos," she hissed, voice tiny and very sharp. The words slid between my ribs and hung there like a hook. I stared past her at the vines and kept my posture steady. She turned forward, satisfied, and lifted her chin for the lens. Kendra and I had sparred for months in small, forgettable ways. She disliked how I asked about vendors and pushed for realistic budgets. She called me controlling when I protected Ryan from her expensive whims. "Grown men evolve," she told him after blocking my questions about money. Ryan laughed it off, but the sound thinned around the edges. I told myself weddings make people act like strangers wearing name tags. Still, her eyes looked like someone guarding a door no one else saw. She pushed Ryan toward fast choices and shiny friends who loved free champagne. I kept in my distance and watched the numbers never quite add up. I promised myself I would speak only when the facts were solid. The planner called for parents, and we shuffled like tired soldiers. Mrs. Dalton straightened Ryan's boutonniere, hope bright as a porch light. My chest tightened because good people were about to meet a wall. Hannah touched my elbow and said, "Stay calm, we'll handle this right." I trusted her steadiness more than my own tired patience. "Remember the rehearsal?" Ryan had said. "She was stressed, that's all." I let him hold that story because he needed it today. "I've got you," I told him, meaning it like a promise. He smiled and patted my shoulder in grateful, innocent trust. I swallowed hard and focused on the next arrangement call. "Wedding party only," the photographer called, arranging us on the patio steps. The groomsmen joked clumsily, trying to shake off tight smiles and rented shoes. I scanned the crowd for the shape I already dreaded seeing. Mark Linton leaned by the bar, sleeves rolled, grin practiced and lazy. He raised a glass to no one, then watched Kendra without blinking. Hannah caught my gaze and frowned because our office gossip had teeth. "You said he was uninvited," she whispered, voice tight with worry. Ryan believed her, I said, keeping my face smooth for the camera. "Of course he did," Hannah answered, hurt and certain at the same time. The assistant clapped and asked us to tilt our bodies toward the sun. Kendra shifted her weight like balancing 2 different stories at once. She tossed her hair toward Mark, then pretended she had not moved. My phone buzzed against my ribs, small and persistent as a bee. I did not check it because the lens was raised and numbers counted. 1, 2, 3, the photographer sang, cheerful and terribly sincere. Kendra's smile sharpened when she felt me hesitate, reading my spine. "Be smart," she breathed, soft threat wrapped as friendly advice. I nodded once, not for her but for timing and accuracy. My throat felt tight, but my hands stayed steady at my sides. The camera clicked like a metronome tracking a beat I already knew. The first round ended, and I stepped into the shade for air. Hannah followed and said, "Check your phone right now, please." Her tone said this was not nerves or jealous worry. I opened the messages and saw an unknown number with several photos. The first frame hit like a hammer, slow and exact. Kendra and Mark behind a service door, bodies fused and careless. The timestamp read last night, after rehearsal, under the venue's string lights. "You were right," I said, voice even because anger wastes oxygen. Hannah stared, then nodded, jaw set and eyes very clear. "We keep calm," she said, "and we keep him safe." I saved the photos, locked the screen, and counted a slow 5. The band tested microphones beside the tent while clouds thinned to bright glass. "We do this right," I said, like a medic planning triage. "First, guard the evidence. Second, shield Ryan from public collapse. Third, choose timing that ends lies without burning everything worth saving." "During the toast," Hannah said, already seeing 2 steps ahead. I nodded, because clarity arrives quickest when the facts are cold. The plan settled into place, simple and heavy and necessary. I straightened my jacket and felt my heartbeat find a slower rhythm. We stepped back into the light and returned to our places. Ryan grinned and clapped my shoulder, unaware of the tide turning. "Speech ready?" he asked, hopeful as a kid with a perfect report card. "I'm ready," I said, meaning far more than he could know. Kendra studied me, suspicion flickering before the charm slid back on. "Smile, Evan," she said. "This isn't a courtroom cross-exam." "I'm smiling," I answered, careful to sound ordinary and not triumphant. The photographer lifted her camera and called for one last cheerful pose. I looked straight into the lens and didn't blink once. Somewhere behind us, the band struck a clean, expectant note. The truth waited, patient, right where I had left it. I met Ryan on a hot August morning when we were 12. We were the last 2 kids picked for a thrown-together baseball team. He grinned, offered the catcher's mitt, and said, "You pitch, I'll make you look good." I threw wild. He blocked everything with stubborn knees and dusty gear. We lost by 8 runs and still felt like kings walking home. By high school, we fixed lawnmowers for cash behind a hardware store. We talked about cars, girls, and whether loyalty could be simple. "It can be," he said, "if you choose people who deserve it." I believed him because he kept every small promise. We stayed close while the rest of our world shuffled and changed. After graduation, I attended community college for construction management, and he joined a telecom crew. Weeknights, we ate at a greasy spoon with chipped red booths. We split meatloaf plates and traded small victories like baseball cards. He called during storms from cell towers and said, "You'd hate this view." I laughed and promised I'd stick to ground level and blueprints. We dated different types and gave blunt advice without bruising each other. I warned him about love that wanted power more than partnership. He called me dramatic and paid the bill with a sheepish shrug. Still, he listened when it mattered and trusted my quiet instincts. That trust felt simple then, like breath or gravity. Ryan met Kendra at a fundraiser downtown and invited me to join. She wore a silver dress that made the room bend toward her. Her handshake felt soft but conclusive, like a contract already decided. "You're the famous best friend," she said, smiling without any warmth. I said I was just Evan, and we all laughed politely. She asked about my job, then asked how much I made. Ryan winced and said, "Kendra's direct, but she means well." I nodded because calling it out would cause an early fight. Later, Hannah said, "She likes the scoreboard more than the game." I told myself first impressions can be unfair when the music is loud. Their dating pace turned fast, then faster, like a car rolling downhill. Kendra toured apartments above their budget and called them investment in our future. Ryan started wearing suits to dinners he previously took in jeans. She planned group events that centered her, then edited the guest list often. "Your friend Evan can come," she'd say, like offering a prize toy. When we talked alone, she pressed him about rings and timelines. He said, "She makes me feel chosen," and I heard the hunger underneath. "Chosen is good," I said, "but chosen shouldn't cost your balance." He asked me to trust him, so I adjusted and tried. I watched for steady ground and kept my mouth mostly shut. On Thanksgiving, she critiqued his mother's sweet potatoes with a bright, firm smile. Ryan tried to smooth it over with jokes that didn't land. In the kitchen, she touched my sleeve and said, "He needs momentum." I asked, calm, "Or does he need space to decide carefully?" She chuckled like I had told a naive joke to a patient adult. Men stall, she said. Women create direction. It's simple math. Ryan walked in, saw the tension, and changed the subject fast. In the car later, he said, "She's just high energy. Don't overthink it." I told him I was rooting for his peace. Nothing else. He believed me and squeezed my shoulder, relieved I hadn't drawn a hard line. When the engagement came, she proposed a ballroom and a winter date. Vendors quoted numbers that made my eyebrows quietly climb. I offered practical alternatives with the calm tone of a budget manager. "Let me dream big," she said. "We'll figure numbers later." Ryan asked me to serve as best man, hopeful as a kid. "Of course," I said, meaning it like an oath carved in oak. Kendra smiled and added, "And you'll help keep things efficient, right?" I answered that my job was to support them and guard logistics. She nodded and said, "Good, because mistakes at weddings are embarrassing." That was the first time she turned the word embarrassing into a leash. Planning narrowed into pressure points nobody saw, but everyone felt. She downgraded Ryan's aunt to a back table for flow and aesthetic. He flinched, then agreed because conflict fatigues even gentle people fast. She cut his college friend list by half with a spreadsheet tone. "These aren't essentials," she said, tapping names like they were stray crumbs. I told Ryan I'd cover the bachelor weekend so costs stayed sane. He said, "You always come through," and hugged me with real relief. When we met the venue manager, she interrupted every practical question I asked. Afterward, she said, "You're not the groom. Stay light and decorative." I noted the word decorative and promised myself I'd watch carefully. The first real crack showed during a Sunday tasting at a crowded hotel. Mark Linton appeared at the bar, acting casual and very pleased. He worked with me, smelled like cologne and shortcuts, and liked shortcuts. "Great couple," he said, eyes glued to Kendra's mouth like a magnet. She pretended not to notice, then smiled halfway, then noticed again. I warned Ryan later, quiet and concise, without drama or judgment. "He's harmless," Ryan said, tired. "He's just loud and bored." Hannah added, "Harmless men don't stare like auditions," and went quiet. I told Ryan we had his back, no matter what unfolded next. He thanked us with weary gratitude and kept the train on its tracks. By the rehearsal week, even small decisions felt like contested ground. Kendra staged the seating chart like a campaign and counted wins. She asked me to rewrite my toast to sound less protective, more glossy. I said, "My toast will be honest, kind, and brief as promised." She held my gaze and answered, "Make sure it's not complicated." Ryan tugged her hand and said, "He's got it, let it be." She released the stare and smiled for the group photo we never printed. In the parking lot, he leaned against my car and looked worn. "Tell me if I'm missing something," he said, voice low and afraid. I told him I'd tell him the second the facts were clear. The rehearsal dinner glowed with candlelight and the sound of silverware tapping plates. The air smelled like roasted rosemary chicken and expensive anxiety. Ryan stood to thank everyone, words shaky but full of love. Kendra smiled at all the right times, gripping his arm like a director ensuring a steady shot. I clapped when everyone else did, though my stomach churned. Hannah nudged me under the table, whispering, "You okay?" I nodded, lying automatically. I had spent too long pretending everything around Ryan was safe. That night would make pretending impossible. When dinner ended, the crowd thinned toward the hotel bar, laughing about college stories. Kendra excused herself to check with the florist and disappeared for 30 minutes. Ryan ordered bourbon and told me, "Man, I can't believe tomorrow's real." I smiled, meaning it. He had chased normal happiness all his life, and it was finally close enough to touch. I wanted him to have it, even if I doubted the foundation under it. "You ready?" I asked. "For marriage?" he said, smirking. "For all of it," I said quietly. "Ready," he answered, but the words sounded practiced, like reading from a card. By 11, Hannah and I left him laughing with his cousins. The venue's cottages sat behind the vines, small and white under soft lights. Crickets hummed from the edge of the road, and the air cooled to a thin mist. Hannah held my hand and said, "She's hiding something." I didn't argue. "You felt it too," she added. "Every second," I said. We walked past the patio where tomorrow's photos would happen. Tables gleamed with glassware already set, waiting for champagne and secrets. I told myself to let the night pass quietly. Truth could wait one more day. But truth has a habit of speaking even when you don't ask it to. At 11:30, I stepped outside again for water and a few minutes of air. The main building's side doors were cracked, leaking faint laughter and music. I heard her voice, Kendra's, low and hushed, but familiar. Then a man's laugh followed, rough, careless, and close. I leaned against the wall, every muscle tightening. "He's clueless," she said, voice sharp with disdain. "That's what makes it easier," the man replied. I knew that voice before the next sentence even landed. Mark! He was supposed to be miles away in the city, working late. My pulse quickened, but I forced my steps slow and silent. I looked through the narrow gap where the kitchen door met its frame. They were near the service hall, half lit, bodies angled in a way that erased boundaries. Mark's hand rested on her lower back like a signature he didn't need to hide. "After the honeymoon," she whispered, "you'll get what you want." He chuckled. "Already got most of it." My grip on the door tightened until my knuckles burned. I could taste metal in my mouth, part rage, part disbelief. When she said, "He's too gentle to ever see it," something inside me hardened. I stepped back, slow, heart pounding but expression blank. I walked around the corner and took the long path to my cottage. Hannah opened the door before I knocked. "You look like you saw something real bad," she said. I sat on the bed and breathed once, twice, before answering. "It's worse than I thought," I said. "Mark and Kendra." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "You sure?" she asked after a long pause. "I heard it," I said, voice low but steady. "I saw them." She nodded, pacing the small room like someone holding a lit match. "We need proof," she said finally. "If you tell Ryan without it, she'll twist everything." She was right. Kendra had built her image carefully. Every friend, every family member saw only charm. Without evidence, I'd look bitter or jealous. I stared out the window toward the glowing reception tent. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow during photos, I'll keep my eyes open." Hannah placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let anger run you," she said softly. "Run it like a job." I nodded, cataloging every step the way I would plan a construction project. She added, "Ryan deserves truth, but not humiliation." I agreed, though a small part of me already knew humiliation was inevitable. That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls felt too close, and my mind replayed their voices like a bad recording stuck on loop. I thought about Ryan's face when he'd said, "She makes me feel chosen." I imagined the look that would replace that feeling once he learned the truth. Around 2 a.m., I walked outside again, moonlight spilling silver over the gravel. The patio stood empty now, chairs stacked and silent. A few workers cleared glasses inside, and faint laughter drifted from the bridal suite upstairs. I looked up once, then forced myself away. There's a kind of silence that feels like standing at the edge of a bridge, knowing you'll have to jump soon. At dawn, I watched the sun burn the mist off the fields. Hannah joined me with 2 paper cups of coffee. "You sure about telling him tomorrow?" she asked. "I have to," I said. "He's my brother in every way but blood." She nodded slowly. "Then do it smart, not loud." I smiled weakly. "When have I ever been loud?" She smirked, trying to soften the weight. "Maybe once," she said, "when someone really deserved it." I looked toward the main house where wedding staff started moving like clockwork. I didn't know it yet, but by the time the cameras clicked, the whisper she gave me would make silence impossible. The ceremony moved like a well-oiled clock, smooth and strangely quiet. Vows landed neatly, rings slid on, and the oak kept steady watch. I stood beside Ryan and tracked Kendra's eyes instead of words. She looked past the guests like she waited for a cue off stage. When applause broke, confetti floated down and stuck to Ryan's hair. He laughed, pure and relieved, and hugged me with both arms. "We did it," he whispered, boyish and grateful and painfully decent. I said, "You did," because I could not add anything else. Hannah's look met mine and held the same unanswered question. We walked toward the patio with the crowd drifting like a tide. The photographers moved with speed, placing bodies like puzzle pieces on stone. "Wedding party first," one called, bright yet firm as a foreman. I checked the line and kept Ryan centered in my silent math. Kendra adjusted her veil while never taking her eyes off me. She measured my patience like a tailor fitting an expensive suit. The assistant fixed a boutonniere and then waved me 2 steps left. "Great," she said. "Now tilt slightly toward the bride. Best man." I tilted, keeping my jaw loose and my shoulders calm and square. Ryan gave me a small grin that said this was all normal. I kept telling myself to let the camera run the show. "Chins down," the photographer sang. "Eyes here. Count of 3. Nice." On the 2, Kendra leaned back and brushed my lapel with lace. Her breath touched my ear, cold and focused like a blade. "Stay silent during photos," she whispered, voice sharp enough to scratch. My spine stayed straight, but I felt every word stick hard. I did not flinch and looked right through the lens opening. The oak behind us framed the shot like a courthouse doorway. "3," the photographer said, and shutters clicked in quick, confident bursts. Ryan laughed, again unaware of the warning fired inches from me. Hannah's mouth tightened, and her hand rose like a quiet signal. They shifted angles, moved us by families, then college groups, then couples. The sun warmed the stone and brought out scents of crushed time. I counted 30 faces and tracked 3 I didn't trust today. Mark leaned near the bar, pretending he belonged like an invited uncle. He toasted the air with a private smile that never reached Ryan. Kendra flicked her gaze toward him, fast enough to deny later. Hannah whispered, "I see it," and I answered, "We document, not react." The photographer called, "Groom with best man," and the crowd parted cleanly. Ryan pulled me close, forehead almost touching mine with affection. "Couldn't have done this without you," he said, voice honest and warm. "Always," I said, and meant it in the old simple way. We faced the lens, 2 kids again, older and better dressed. Kendra lingered at the edge and tried to claim the center. The assistant gently redirected her with a smooth practiced motion. She smirked at me like we shared an inside joke I hated. "Big smiles," the photographer chirped. "Let's get that brother energy." I smiled for Ryan and let everything else fall behind him. Shutters snapped, fast and sure, sealing seconds in neat little boxes. The band tested speakers, and a warm hum settled across the patio. I waited for the next move, hands steady and eyes wide open. Chapter 4. The photograph that changed everything, Block B. "Entire wedding party," the photographer called. "Then we're done for now." People shuffled back onto the steps while glasses clinked like light hail. Kendra arranged her train, then drifted toward me with practiced charm. "Remember," she breathed, "silent looks good on you in pictures." I stared past her and kept my mouth empty of words. The count began, and that was when it happened for real. A late guest jogged past the glass doors behind the patio. He swung the door wide, and the interior lights flared like stage lamps. For 2 seconds, the reflective pane turned into a blunt, bright mirror. The frame caught everyone and everything that faced the camera. Mark stood inside that doorway, one hand raised in a half wave. His other hand held the edge of her veil, careless and familiar. Kendra's head angled slightly toward him at the exact wrong moment. The lens froze all of it with that ruthless, mechanical honesty. I did not speak, and I did not move, not 1 inch. Ryan laughed at a joke he didn't actually hear or understand. The photographer lowered her camera and frowned at her preview screen. "One more," she said. Someone flashed from inside. Weird reflection. My heart kicked once hard, and then settled into a clean rhythm. Hannah's eyes widened, then cut to me with fierce, focused relief. We repeated the pose, and the door swung shut on the echo. The second shot was perfect. The kind couples, frame above mantles, but the first shot existed now, a small, exact trapdoor. "We'll check later," I murmured to Hannah, calm and absolute. "You saw what I saw," she answered, voice steady and low. "Yes," I said, "and now the cameras are witness without feelings." Kendra brushed past and smiled like nothing ever broke her line. "Cocktail hour," she said. "Let's get beautiful candids, everyone." Ryan kissed her cheek, kind and hopeful like always. I swallowed my plan and kept my silence exactly where she wanted. But silence changed now, but it became a wire pulled tight across ground. I guided Ryan toward the bar and kept my tone light. He asked about the toast, and I told him it was ready. "Make me cry," he joked, "but not ugly cry, please." "You'll be fine," I said, and meant it like a promise. Behind us, the photographer compared frames with the assistant, brows knit. "We got something odd on the first group shot," she said softly. "Probably glare," the assistant answered, uncertain but trying to be helpful. I nodded to Hannah, and we edged closer without drawing any eyes. The image had already changed the wedding, and no one knew yet. The reception started with laughter echoing off the white tent canopy. Glasses clinked, candles flickered, and the air filled with soft music and the smell of roast chicken and fresh basil. I stood by the bar with Hannah, watching Ryan move through guests like a man living his dream. His happiness hurt to watch, too pure for the lie it stood on. The photographer's assistant passed me with a laptop tucked under one arm, still scrolling through previews. Beautiful shots, she said cheerfully. That first group photo might need a little edit. Weird reflection inside. I nodded and forced a smile. Mind if I see it later? I asked casually. Sure, after dinner, she said, then hurried away. I checked my phone, half hoping for a distraction, half dreading one. A new message blinked from an unknown number. The text read, "Thought you'd appreciate proof before the toast." Attached were 4 photos. My thumb hesitated above the first one. The screen opened to an image I already knew existed but still hit like a blow. It was Kendra and Mark again. Same hallway, same smirk, but this time clear as daylight. One picture showed her hand gripping his collar, another his hand at her waist, fingers sliding under lace. The final one was a close-up selfie. Mark's grin, Kendra's reflection in the mirror behind him. Timestamp, 30 minutes before the ceremony. My breath came slow. The world dimmed to quiet edges. Hannah touched my arm, reading my face before I said anything. "It's them?" she asked softly. I nodded, handing her the phone. She scrolled through the images, her mouth tightening. "You can't unsee that," she whispered. "No," I said. "And now it's not just what I saw. It's what the camera caught." Looked toward the photographer's station near the back of the tent. She was laughing with an assistant, the memory card dangling from a lanyard. Somewhere on that card sat the photo that showed Mark inside the doorway, touching Kendra's veil. "Between these 2 sources," I said, "we have enough truth to level a mountain." Ryan joined us, grinning. "You 2 look like detectives," he said. "We're fine," I replied. "Just checking logistics." He laughed. "You always check logistics. Loosen up, man. Tonight's about love." Hannah smiled politely and raised her glass. "To love," she said. I forced a toast back and prayed he didn't notice the tremor in my hand. He didn't. He was too busy scanning for Kendra, too blind to see how often her gaze slipped toward the edge of the tent, where Mark stood with 2 co-workers, holding a drink like a trophy. Dinner plates arrived, speeches from parents followed, and the hum of normal celebration filled the space. Kendra's father thanked Ryan for making her the happiest woman alive. My stomach turned, but my face stayed calm. I typed a short message to the unknown sender. "Who are you?" No answer. I tried again. "Why send these to me?" This time 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Silence. I saved the images, backed them up twice, then deleted them from the message thread. Proof was fragile. I couldn't risk it disappearing. When I finally looked up, the photographer waved at me from her laptop station. "Found the shot you wanted," she called. I crossed the tent, Hannah close behind. She spun the screen toward me. "See that?" she said, zooming in on the reflective glass behind the patio. There it was, clear and undeniable. Mark's face, the veil, Kendra's turned profile, frozen in betrayal. "That's no glare," Hannah whispered. The photographer frowned. "Is that a person? Weird. Thought it was just lighting." I said, "You mind sending me a copy? Groom might want every candid." "Sure," she said, dragging the file to a folder and exporting it. She didn't know she'd just sealed the end of the wedding. I walked out into the evening air, cool and sharp. The vineyard lights shimmered like coins in the dark. Hannah slipped beside me, quiet until the door shut. "So what now?" she asked. I stared at the horizon, thinking of Ryan's laugh, his kindness, the years we'd built. "Now," I said, "we tell the truth, but it has to come from the stage, not whispers, not screenshots." "You're really going to do it?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "the toast. I'll make it sound like memory until it becomes evidence." She nodded once, firm and certain. "Then I'll be right there when it lands." Inside, the planner tapped the microphone, announcing, "It's time for the best man's speech." Applause rippled through the tent. Ryan grinned at me, half drunk on joy. Kendra looked amused, confident, unaware that the storm had already formed. I slid my phone into my jacket pocket, felt the heat of it like a warning bell. The photographer stood near the dance floor, camera ready. Mark drifted closer to the bar, watching. I raised my glass, heart steady, voice calm. "Before I begin," I said to myself under the noise, "breathe once and aim true." The words were almost silent, the last quiet thing before everything broke. I tapped the microphone and let the tent fold into hush. The ridge lights warmed my face like small, steady suns. Ryan watched me with the trust we built across 2 decades. Kendra's smile looked polished, sharp enough to cut ribbon. I lifted my glass and kept my breathing slow and steady. "Good evening," I said. "I'll keep this short, honest, and clear. Laughter loosened shoulders without loosening the truth near us. I want to talk about loyalty, because weddings depend on it. Silverware quieted, and the band stopped testing another bright chord. I held the room the way a level holds a straight line. Loyalty is keeping a promise when nobody checks the scoreboard, I continued. It is showing up early and staying late, even without applause. I glanced at Ryan and watched pride push past his nerves. My friend has always done that, I said, and heads nodded. He caught my wild pitches and never once asked for credit. He deserves truth more than any pretty story told tonight. Chairs stopped moving as attention narrowed into one beam. So I will give him truth, and I will be gentle. I set my glass down and folded a note card twice. The tent waited, breathing with me, counting seconds like heartbeats. I planned jokes, I said. Bad mustaches, worse cars, cafeteria pizza. The room chuckled, and Ryan shook his head with a grin. But something changed, and it changed right here today. Bodies leaned forward like waves, leaning toward a rocky shore. A camera caught a moment none of us expected, I continued. It saw what distracted eyes missed, the way cameras sometimes do. Kendra shifted, perfect smile tightening by a single careful notch. "Ma'am," I asked the photographer, "do you have the first group shot?" She nodded, cautious and professional, reading the gravity in my posture. The assistant rolled a cart forward, while guests craned without standing. "Mind projecting it on the screen?" I asked, even and direct. The planner started to object, then paused at Ryan's raised hand. "Let him," he said, thin-voiced but steady enough for one decision. The screen flickered and filled with the patio steps. Zoomed to the glass behind us, there by the door. The cursor drifted. The pane brightened like a blunt mirror. Mark's face appeared, lifted in a half-wave, smug and careless. His other hand held the edge of Kendra's veil like ownership. Kendra's profile angled toward him, private smile poorly hidden and telling. The room gasped, air leaving in. Lungs, silverware frozen above resting plates. "That is glare," Kendra said, voice bright, brittle, and quick. "It is a trick of light. Reflections lie," she added fast. A cousin dropped a fork. A groomsman swore into his napkin. I mirrored my phone to the projector and opened the message. Her smile in Mark's mirror looked like a mask losing hooks. The timestamp sat in the corner, dull, exact, and unforgiving. Several tables flinched as cold wind cut seams between people. Ryan stared at the screen, then at me, color draining. "Is this real?" he asked, voice scraped thin by confusion. "Yes," I answered, because loud words would only scatter more shrapnel. Kendra shook her head and reached for him with rehearsed concern. "Baby, it is edited," she said, working sweetness like a skill. "He wants attention, Doc. He hates that you chose me this year." Ryan did not look at her, Doc. He stayed locked on me. "Did you take those photos?" he asked Mark, rough and shaking. Mark stared at the floor and swallowed, then shook his head. "Answer him," I said, level as a plumb line on concrete. "Yes or no, clean and simple. Here and now, Mark." He lifted his eyes, hunted for cover, and found none available. "Yes," he said finally, "and I am sorry for being reckless." Kendra seized the lifeline and nodded like it solved everything important. It was stupid, but harmless, flirting, and blown up by jealousy. I opened my palm, and Hannah placed printed stills in it. Jokes rarely involved doorways, hidden corners, and hands under lace, I said. I passed the photos to Ryan without looking away from his face. He studied them like a carpenter reading a beam for splits. His shoulders sagged, then squared, then sagged again, fighting for balance. Outside, a cork popped and rolled with absurd cheer. The tent held its breath like winter pavement. The band leader lowered his baton and stared at the floor. I lifted my glass but did not drink, letting steadiness return. "I wanted jokes," I said. "Not this, not tonight, not ever. But Ryan deserves truth before he signs the rest of his life." I turned to him and kept my eyes clean, soft, and clear. "I love you," I said, "and I will help you breathe." Silence spread completely. He closed his eyes and breathed once, then twice, gathering himself. He faced the guests and found a voice with a new spine. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please give us a few minutes." The planner began guiding people toward the courtyard with practiced kindness. Guests drifted into the courtyard while staff closed the tent quietly. Ryan stood beside me, breathing slow, counting seconds like rungs on a ladder. Kendra reached for his arm again, voice sugared and tight with fear. "Let's talk alone," she said. "Not in front of strangers in pictures." He didn't move. and the wish drained from her smile. Mark hovered near the bar, blending with linen shadows. Hannah stepped closer and asked Ryan if he wanted water now. In a minute, he answered, eyes fixed on the screen that vanished. I felt the room's heat break like a storm over roofs. This was the moment where loyalty would hold, or finally snap. We walked to the patio steps where earlier photos had promised a future. The oak shadow reached long across the stone like a dark wave. Ryan looked at me once, then faced Kendra like a captain leaving harbor. Tell me the truth, all of it. One version, he said. She crossed her arms and claimed the camera angle confused people tonight. We kissed once, she added. It was nerves, and it never mattered. Mark lowered his eyes and chewed his lip until the lie thinned. Stop, Ryan said, voice low, a saw finally biting into hardwood. No speeches, no edits, just facts I can live with. Kendra tried another route, layered with tears she could almost produce. I was scared, she said. Marriage is heavy, and I freaked out. Ryan studied her carefully, then asked where she spent the rehearsal break. She said the florist needed revisions and the hotel printer jammed again. Hannah cleared her throat and said the florist had left at 9 sharp. Mark looked up, pale, like the air thinned around his choices. Were you in the service hallway? Ryan asked, calm and steady. She glanced at Mark, then blamed champagne and stress and jealous friends. Ryan didn't blink, and silence pressed harder than any raised voice. Ryan turned to Mark and asked for clean words without polish or padding. Mark swallowed hard and stared at the ground like it might open. We started texting a month after you announced the engagement, he said. It got physical a few weeks later. Then we stopped, then didn't. The courtyard tilted, and I caught Ryan's elbow with my hand. He stood upright and breathed through his nose until color returned slowly. Did you sleep together this week? He asked, careful and painful. Mark nodded once, a small admission that cracked every pretty frame. Somewhere a glass shattered, and the sound ran like ice across stone. Ryan asked the planner for the license and the signed ceremony copy. She retrieved the folder from the office, like lifting a warm coal carefully. He handed it to me and said he wanted it held for tonight. The courthouse can explain what happens next, he added, steadying. Kendra's face hardened, losing the soft edges of performance and charm. You're overreacting, she said. Our families are here. This can be fixed. We can't fix a foundation poured with lies, he answered, tired and clear. She warned about deposits, vendors, and travel plans collapsing publicly. Public collapse beats private rot that never stops smelling, he replied. Mark tried to slip toward the parking lot behind the hedge line. I stepped into his path because courage sometimes needs a simple gate. You will stay until he decides what happens. Next, I said. He looked past me, then nodded, hands open, sweating through his cuffs. I'm sorry, he muttered, words flat, like receipts totaled after closing. You're sorry you were seen, Hannah answered, calm as a level. Ryan walked over and told Mark to hand him the house key. Mark fumbled, then produced the spare we didn't know existed. Ryan pocketed it, and the space felt cleaner by one dishonest object. Kendra aimed for one last push, hard to rattle the railings. If you end this now, you ruin everything we built this year. Ryan said he preferred ruins to a museum of fakes displayed forever. She said their friends would judge, and opportunities would vanish Monday morning. He said judgment fades, but bad truth clings like smoke to clothes. I need you to leave the property, he added, voice gravel now. The planner cleared her throat and said a driver waited by the gate. Kendra stared like I had stolen a promised throne. She lifted her chin and walked away, veil trailing like a surrender flag. Guests watched from a distance, whispering less now that truth felt heavy. Ryan sat on the step, and I lowered beside him carefully. Hannah stood nearby, guard and witness, steady as a lamp in weather. He said he felt empty and strangely clean at the same time. I said clean air hurts first after a smoky room clears. He nodded and asked if the story could pause here tonight. It can pause, I said, and we will pick the work tomorrow. He thanked me, then asked me to cancel the band and close the bar. I told the planner, and the night exhaled like a tired building. The morning after, the venue smelled like coffee, lemons, and rain-soaked wood. Ryan and I sat at a diner with cracked vinyl booths and steady waitresses, his hands wrapped around a mug he didn't drink, just held for heat. I feel like I've been emptied out, he said, voice sanded down. Good, I answered. Now we can build on clean concrete. He managed a half smile that didn't reach his eyes but tried. Hannah slid into the booth with a stack of napkins and quiet focus. 2 simple tracks, she said. Personal and practical. We'll walk both today. Ryan nodded because lists made sense when feelings didn't. I paid the check before the food came because deciding early helped us move. We drove to the clerk's office in town, a beige building with low ceilings. A window sign explained licenses and deadlines in blunt language, no lace. I spoke to the clerk while Ryan listened and breathed in slow counts. We learned the license wasn't filed yet, which meant no legal marriage. The clerk explained annulment versus filing void, quick and plain, no drama. We signed a form to void the license, which closed one door. Courthouse clarity, Ryan said, testing the words like new boots. Paper doesn't cure everything, I told him, but it stops the bleeding. He exhaled, shoulders lowering one notch, enough to stand without, swaying. We walked out into a sky that looked rinsed and almost honest. At his apartment, we boxed the wedding favors that now felt like props. I labeled nothing. I didn't want a museum of yesterday's plans. I'll ship her dress when she sends an address, he said. Or the planner can manage returns and vendor credits, I answered. He called the venue manager and kept his voice even, professional, brief. Deposits were sunk, a portion could be recovered, the rest counted as lessons. He thanked the manager like a grown man and hung up slowly. Money stings less than time, he said, pressing his palms to his eyes. Time comes back if you protect it now, I told him. We stacked boxes by the door and left the apartment breathing again. Work waited on Monday like a test you know you'll pass if steady. Mark hovered by the copy room, smug erased, nerves loud enough to hear. I asked HR for a private meeting and kept my sentences tight. Coworker used a company phone to take and transmit explicit images, I said. Involved a client event and possible harassment patterns, evidence saved off device. HR listened, asked for timestamps, then asked about prior concerns. I gave facts, not feelings, just dates and policy lines that mattered. They opened an investigation, which moved at a careful clockwork pace. 2 weeks later, Mark resigned before corrective action turned official and permanent. He left a badge on a desk like an apology no one heard. Kendra tried a different road, the social one, paved with captions and spin. Her posts showed wine glasses, lakeside photos, and words about growth. Friends texted me screenshots and asked if we had misunderstood. We didn't, I replied, and we don't need to win online. She reached out to Ryan twice. Soft language about counseling and forgiveness. He answered once, I hope you find peace. We are done. She sent a final message about lawyers that never turned real. Her parents called his mother and apologized in a way that landed. We missed signs, her father admitted, which eased one corner of the mess. Everyone learned how silence can hide more than it protects. Healing never shows up like a parade. It arrives like steady weather. We built small routines that didn't depend on pretending. Tuesday nights, we walked a loop around the high school track. We talked about tower climbs, stubborn engines, and one-day trips with no plans. He picked up old hobbies, like restoring a beat-up motorcycle in his garage. I need to fix something that stays fixed, he said, grease on his hands. Hannah brought sandwiches and a Torque wrench she'd borrowed from her dad. Gentle on the threads, she told him, and he laughed for the first real time. By Thanksgiving, he sounded like himself again, not the broken echo from that night. Gratitude felt smaller and truer, like a coin you keep in your pocket. One evening, months later, we sat on my porch with 2 quiet beers. The neighborhood dogs barked at nothing, and a train horn folded the distance. You were right to speak, Ryan said, words simple and fully awake. I kept trying to be chosen instead of choosing what's right. I told him I'd do it again, and faster if needed. I know, he said, then added something that mattered more. Next time I'll believe the uneasy feeling sooner. It's there to help. He asked about the toast I had planned before everything pivoted. It was soft, I said, about loyalty and bad mustaches and cafeteria pizza. He grinned, and the grin stayed, anchored by a spine we had rebuilt together. In quiet moments, I replayed the thin second before I spoke. The room, the screen, the breath I took, the way the lens told truth. I thought about Kendra's whisper and how orders collapse when facts stand up. I didn't celebrate what happened. I respected it like controlled demolition. You don't cheer a building falling, even if it frees the street. You learn where not to pour a foundation next time. You remember that silence can be a tool or a trap, never neutral. You keep your words for when they count, and then make them count. And when the camera blinks again, You face it with a steady jaw. We returned to the vineyard in early spring, months after the collapse. The hills wore new green, softer than the harsh summer I remembered. Ryan parked under the oak and breathed like a runner after a hill. "You good?" I asked, checking his face for echoes that hurt. "I'm good," he said, "just measuring the room before I walk in." The tasting room buzzed with weekend couples and polite laughter between pours. Hannah waved from a back table she'd staked with 3 empty glasses. "You two took long enough," she said, smiling with genuine ease. The air smelled like citrus and oak staves warming in sunlight. I felt the knot in my chest loosened by one careful notch. We weren't here for a wedding, we were here for closure. The vineyard hosted a small open house with music and cheap sandwiches. The planner recognized us and walked over with cautious professional grace. "How are you all?" she asked, bracing for any leftover weather. "We're fine," Ryan said, and meant it with steady, ordinary weight. She nodded and said she had something filed under our date. "You may want it," she added, and handed him a sealed envelope. Hannah raised an eyebrow and asked if we should open it now. Ryan turned the envelope, then tucked it into his jacket pocket. "After we see the patio," he said, "we'll give the place its due." The patio looked smaller without tables and restless chatter around it. The stone held cool morning shade, clean and quiet like a reset. I traced the steps with my eyes until they lost their old sting. Ryan stood where the group had stood, and his shoulders stayed level. "Strange," he said. "It doesn't feel like a battlefield anymore." "Because it isn't," Hannah answered, brushing dust from the railing. "It's just a patio that once told the truth sharply." He smiled and kicked a pebble into the ivy with no ceremony. "I kept hearing the click of the camera for weeks," he said. "Now it's just wind," I replied, and we let the breeze keep talking. We walked inside to the wall of framed photos from past events. Most showed anonymous couples holding each other under string lights and wishes. Ryan stopped at a smaller frame near the corner and leaned in. It wasn't ours, but the angle looked close to the one that flipped us. "Funny how every shot says joy and misses the math behind it," he said. "The math matters," I answered, "but you can't photograph subtraction easily." Hannah chuckled and asked if we were writing a manual again. "Always," Ryan said, "only this edition has fewer mistakes printed." A server passed with a tray and offered sparkling water with quiet kindness. Ryan took 2 and handed one to me like an old habit. We opened the envelope at a table painted with dried wine rings. Inside sat a USB drive and a brief note from the photographer. She wrote that she kept a copy in case panic ate the first one. She added that she had cropped versions if we preferred cleaner memories. Ryan smiled at the line about cleaner memories because the kindness rang true. "Let's look," he said, and the planner offered her laptop without fuss. The screen filled with thumbnails, then opened the group shot we remembered. Mark's reflection stood there again, but it didn't punch the same way. "That man doesn't live in our house anymore," Ryan said softly. Hannah squeezed his hand, and the room relaxed by another quiet inch. After a while, we wandered to the gift shop with racks of local goods. A reporter from a small lifestyle blog recognized the planner and asked questions. She drifted toward us and paused, reading our faces before intruding. "Mind if I ask about last summer?" she said, voice cautious. "It became a rumor in town, then disappeared like most rumors do." Ryan considered, then shook his head with an easy practice calm. "No comment," he said. "We honored the truth and moved forward." The reporter nodded, understanding that the story stopped where dignity began. "That's fair," she said, and turned back to tasting notes and weekend copy. We returned to the patio, relieved the town wanted wine more than gossip. We sat at the edge of the steps and watched a new couple pose. Their laughter sounded light, uncoached, and without hidden agendas. "Think they'll make it?" Hannah asked, half joking, half protective. "If they choose each other daily," Ryan said, watching the wind lift a veil. "If they listen when silence feels heavy instead of pretending it's nothing." I asked him if he worried about trust ever feeling risky again. "It always was," he said, "but risk isn't a reason to freeze." Rested his elbows on his knees and looked out across the rows. "I learned the cost of ignoring a blinking warning light," he added. "I also learned how good air feels when the smoke clears." By late afternoon, music drifted soft, and the tasting room thinned. The planner brought over a small box with our names from old labels. Inside were place cards, a menu, and the key to the bridal suite. "We found it under a dresser after the cleaners finished last fall," she said. Ryan laughed once, short, surprised, then gave the key back immediately. Let the next couple use a new one, he said, friendly and final. She thanked him and left us with the box, now just cardboard again. Do you want any of this? I asked, lifting a menu that meant nothing. No, he said. Leave it with the past where it can't follow us. We walked the gravel road to the parking area as the sun lowered. Ryan stopped by the oak and looked up into its thick branches. I'm not afraid of photos anymore, he said, words steady and plain. I'm glad you weren't afraid of your voice when it counted, I answered. He studied me and nodded, the way carpenters nod at level beams. You spoke once, he said, and it let me hear myself again. That was the point, I said. Not to win, just to clear fog. He opened the truck door and tapped the envelope with 2 fingers lightly. Let's keep a copy, he said. Not as a threat, just a record. We drove out, windows cracked, letting cool air erase the last stale breath. Spring settled into summer, and life resumed its ordinary hum without ceremony. I measured days by job sites, coffee strength, and the quiet in my head. Ryan checked in most evenings, not to rehash, but to calibrate calmly. We went back to our diner, where the waitress remembered our old orders. Less salt this time? She joked, sliding plates with practiced grace and kindness. He ate like a man finally trusting the ground under his feet again. We talked about work, the truck's rattle, and a fishing trip someday. Not once did we say her name, and the silence felt correct. Some stories heal by speaking, this one healed by choosing quiet boundaries. The past faded like a stain washed many careful times and finally gone. Hannah and I grew closer in the way calm people do. No declarations, just dependable presence and a handful of well-timed questions. She saw when I tired and pushed water across the table gently. She knew when humor fit and when silence worked better than advice. You kept your head, she said, tracing a ring of condensation. I kept my feet, I answered, because balance mattered more than victory. We helped Ryan move apartments without announcing it to anyone else. Smaller place, better light, he said, opening windows like clean decisions. We left the boxes unlabeled because categories no longer felt necessary. Starting over looked less like a headline and more like the right routine. Kendra tried one last time to rewrite what everyone already understood clearly. She sent a letter that talked about pressure, fear, and misunderstood affection. Ryan read it once, then placed it in a drawer without drama. Not every story needs a rebuttal, he said, closing the drawer gently. He wasn't angry anymore, only done, and done is its own kind freedom. Mark's resignation had drained the office of small, constant static and noise. People worked, laughed, and stopped glancing toward closed doors suspiciously. HR asked me to summarize events with neutral dates and exact details. I did, because clean records protect peace long after feelings fade. The company moved on, and the air felt easier for everyone. We kept the photo file on one simple drive in my desk. It wasn't for leverage or late-night victory laps. It was a record. Some truths should rest, but none should be erased by convenience. Now and then, I checked the thumbnail to confirm it still existed. I never opened the images. I only verified the anchor remained. Knowing they were there steadied me the way studs steady a wall. Ryan didn't need reminders once the lesson settled into his bones. He trusted his instincts faster, and he defended his boundaries quickly. Silence is for peace now, not for protecting lies, he said. We agreed, and our days took the shape of that simple rule. At the county fair in July, a band covered old rock with charm. We walked the aisles, collected too many sauce samples, and lost count laughing. A rescue group displayed dogs with ridiculous ears and heroic patience. Ryan knelt, scratched one head, and said, "Maybe it's time again." I knew he meant more than a dog, but the dog came first. He adopted a mutt that worshipped tennis balls and porch naps. "I'll start with loyalty that barks," he said, smiling with quiet humor. Weeks later, he met someone kind who liked slow movies and breakfast. No rushing, no declarations, just steady steps across a floor he trusted. I watched without worry because he now listened when silence grew heavy. I revised my toast the night I finally slept without that tent in mind. It wasn't for presentation, it was for the man who almost broke. I wrote about loyalty being a job, not a mood or performance. I wrote about cameras catching facts while people chase prettier possibilities. I wrote about speaking once and letting the truth do its work. Then I folded the card and put it in my toolbox carefully. Tools belong with tools, and words are tools when used responsibly. I didn't need applause, correction, or even thanks anymore. I needed clarity. The card stayed there like a gauge I could trust when unsure. Some days I read it, nodded, and went back to framing and schedules. Months later, the vineyard sent a coupon and a note of goodwill. We returned for one glass and a walk. Nothing ceremonial or sentimental. The oak looked older by a day, which felt right and honest. A new couple posed, where we once stood, hearts open and confident. I hoped their math was good, and their silence never hid rot. Hannah leaned on the railing and bumped my shoulder on purpose lightly. "Would you speak again if you had to?" she asked softly. "In a heartbeat," I said, "but only once, only when it counts." She smiled because she understood the value behind that quiet promise. We left before sunset, choosing traffic and radio over lingering and old echoes. I think about that whisper sometimes, not with anger, but with caution. "Stay silent during photos," she said, trying to turn quiet into a cage. Silence isn't a cage anymore. It is a room with open windows. Inside it, decisions can breathe and people can settle their shoulders properly. I don't chase dramatic endings or perfect speeches or cinematic justice. I choose clean words, good timing, and consequences that protect honest people. That night didn't make me louder. It made me measured and deliberate. I learned to keep receipts, read reflections, and trust the weight of evidence. Most of all, I learned one voice can steady a room without shouting. I spoke once, and everyone listened long enough for truth to finish. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like the video and tell me what you think in the comments. And of course, subscribe for more stories like this one.